This podcast is brought to you by the Spur of the Moment Podcast.
Welcome to the AI Analysis Podcast, and today we are diving into some really cool material that you sent our way.
Yeah, we're looking at excerpts from Arete Podcast number 3.
Arete Podcast number 3, Rock Band Again and Forever, featuring the band Again.
That's right.
So we want to kind of unpack for you Again's perspective on their own music,
Right.
what they see happening in the music industry right now, and their initial thoughts on artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, this is interesting because we know that Virus, the vocalist,
Right.
also known as Virus Vox, would later collaborate with Jake from the Arete Podcast
Yeah.
to create Toon Talk 2.0.
Right.
So listening back to this earlier conversation gives us kind of a unique perspective,
Yeah.
like a snapshot in time
Yeah.
before things really took off.
Right.
The band itself, again,
Mhm.
is made up of Virus, Ego on guitar, and Setsei on bass.
Okay.
And their backgrounds are surprisingly diverse.
Yeah.
Virus has a history that includes a dark music label. Okay. And interestingly, a stint in a boy band.
Wow.
Ego has played with various mainstream Latin American acts.
Huh.
And Setsei comes from the well-known Mexican bands Resorte and Dog.
Okay.
Quite a combination.
Yeah. Right. It really is. And the formation of Again sounds almost like a happy accident, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, Virus initially got in touch with Jake to be a guest on the Arete podcast after another guest canceled,
Right.
like a sort of last-minute replacement situation.
Exactly. And as Virus himself put it, sometimes those unexpected connections turn out to be the best.
That's often the case.
It really is, yeah. But what's also intriguing is how all of these varied musical journeys have kind of come together
Right.
to create this really distinct sound.
Yeah.
For again, Jake on the Arete podcast, he immediately picked up on it and described it as a blend of glam rock with a harder metal edge. Yeah. So Virus credits this to their diverse influences. He mentions his own appreciation for bands like Meshuggah,
Okay.
Setsei's love for funk and hip-hop,
Yeah.
and then Ego's broader rock sensibilities.
It's really a melting pot.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Sonically, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and you are particularly interested in the current state of rock music.
Yeah.
And that was definitely something that Virus and Jake talked about.
Right.
They touch on rock's reduced presence in the mainstream,
Yeah.
especially on, traditional radio.
Right. I mean, that's definitely been a topic of conversation for a while.
Of course, the internet has just fundamentally changed how we all discover music.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Virus offered a pretty key insight into this shift. He suggests that the definition of a rock star has evolved,
Okay.
moving away from the stereotypical image of excess
Okay.
and more toward, creative control.
Right.
But he also brings up a really practical point, the economics of touring. He contrasted the significant costs associated with, like, a full rock band setup.
Yeah.
The crew,
Who's a crew?
the equipment, the logistics,
The logistics.
versus, like, the leaner operations of solo pop artists.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
He even used Bad Bunny as an example
He did.
of a more financially viable mainstream option.
Yes.
Just due to a smaller touring footprint.
Right. Smaller footprint.
Yeah.
Less overhead.
Yeah. I mean, it always comes back to the money side of things, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah.
Oh,
It does.
Good of the day.
And that's something that they discuss, too, kind of the impact of marketing.
Yeah.
And how certain artists can achieve those massive streaming numbers relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Potentially without, the same perceived depth in their music.
Virus specifically mentioned Pesto Pluma.
You did, yeah.
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 And so this brings up that whole debate about the balance between genuine artistic development
Yeah.
and manufactured popularity. They talked about the role of auto-tune and how its widespread use raises questions about what constitutes true vocal talent these days.
Right.
They also brought up the anecdote about a supposed live performance by Bad Bunny,
Right.
where his auto-tune cut out,
Cut out.
though Virus did acknowledge that it was just a rumor.
Right.
Yeah. He did reference other recordings that seem to support the idea that technology plays a significant role in his studio sound.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Virus had some very strong convictions about the purpose of music.
He did.
And he drew a clear distinction
Yeah.
between what his band aimed to achieve lyrically and what he sees as a lack of substance in some of the more mainstream offerings.
Yeah, he believes that music should connect with listeners on a deeper level.
Yeah.
It's not just about entertainment. It's about evoking emotion.
Right.
It's about saying something.
Right.
Right. And I think that's a key differentiator for rock music for him. And he shared the very personal story behind their song, Kamikaze.
Right. That was a powerful moment on the Arete podcast.
It was. Kamikaze was directly inspired by the tragic experience of Virus's father's suicide, which, he witnessed as a child.
Right.
And he explained how the song serves as a continuation of his father's life, a way to keep his memory alive through their art.
Yes. It's a beautiful sentiment,
And it really underscores the deeply personal wellspring of their songwriting.
Absolutely. It highlights the emotional core that drives against creative process.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, we should turn to the area that you're particularly keen to explore.
Yes.
The impact of AI on music and creativity.
Yes.
And it was evident from their discussion that the band is both aware of and concerned about the rapid advancements in this technology.
Right, and they specifically talked about the growing trend of AI being used to generate songs featuring deceased artists.
Right.
Imagine hearing new tracks supposedly featuring Jim Morrison, Bob Dylan. Yeah.
Maybe even John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, all created by artificial intelligence.
I mean, this is actually happening already.
It is.
We're seeing these AI-generated tracks popping up.
Yeah.
Featuring, familiar names.
Right.
And I think a key concern that, again, highlighted is the potential for this kind of content to overshadow opportunities for new musicians.
Yeah.
To break through.
If listeners are constantly presented with AI versions of, these established artists, it could become even harder for emerging talent to gain traction and find an audience.
Right. It's almost like, they're competing with ghosts of the past.
Yeah.
In a way, Yeah.
Yeah. Virus also raised the concern of potential creative stagnation. Now with the ease with which music can be produced, particularly with AI tools, it brings up the question of whether the focus might shift toward chasing social media validation.
Yeah.
Those likes and shares.
Yeah. Rather than striving for genuine artistic innovation.
Right. And it ties into a broader point that Virus made.
Okay.
Using the analogy of Facebook.
Whoa, okay.
Right.
How does that connect?
Well, he described it as a technology that, despite its initial promise of connection, has had unintended negative consequences.
Yeah.
Driven in part by the motivations of investors.
Right.
The outcome has been more complex.
Yeah.
And in some ways, detrimental to genuine interaction.
Right, yeah.
And so he's kind of drawing a parallel there with the potential of AI.
Okay. Yeah.
And then he brought up another compelling analogy.
Okay.
Fire and AI.
Okay.
Both incredibly powerful tools that can be used for great benefit or cause significant harm, depending on how they're controlled and applied.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And Virus expressed, a strong worry about the potential removal of the human factor from music creation. He used a striking comparison to becoming overly reliant on medication for bodily functions. Suggesting that overdependence on AI in music could lead to a kind of creative weakening over time,
Yeah.
It's like if you don't exercise certain muscles, they atrophy.
Right, the atrophy.
Right.
Yeah.
They even considered hypothetical scenarios.
Okay.
Like AI mimicking artists like Elvis Presley performing Nirvana songs.
Wow.
Right? I mean,
interesting.
While it might be an interesting novelty initially, the underlying fear is that it could further obscure new and original voices.
Right.
Beneath a flood of, AI-generated remixes and mashups of, iconic artists.
Right.
However,
Okay.
Ego offered a more hopeful perspective.
Okay.
He acknowledged the possibility of a challenging period with AI, but expressed confidence in humanity's inherent drive for originality.
Okay.
Right. The hope is that, eventually people will seek out authentic human expression and that AI will ultimately become a tool to augment rather than replace human creativity.
Right. Yeah.
I think about their own creative process in this context, right?
Yeah.
They described how Ego often starts with a feeling or a raw musical idea.
Okay.
And then Virus develops the melody and lyrics based on that foundation.
Okay. So it still sounds like a deeply human and collaborative process rooted in emotion and personal connection.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So today's episode is sponsored by The Spur of the Moment Podcast, everybody. Come join us every Saturday. We're going to do this. We're going to sit here. We're going to talk about the news. Time to talk about the Minecraft.
Okay.
It looks bad. We're going to talk about movies. That new Joker movie is apparently terrible, and I want to see it so badly because I hear it's awful. We're going to make some jokes. We're going to have some laughs.
There's a lot of funny jokes in there. There's a lot of weird jokes in there. The Channing Tatum one will always make me laugh. Especially when you hear the behind the scenes stuff, like when you hear the behind the scenes story of how they just phoned them up.
We're occasionally going to have other people along for the ride.
A really fun fact though is I learned last year that that Coraline was Leica and not Disney.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I can see why you would make that mistake. Yeah. Because it does seem like it's a different. And to be fair,
that would be a horrifying, terrible Disney movie.
It would be because yeah. And we're just gonna have a generally good time. George, do you have anything else you want to say about our podcast? Make people watch it.
We watch movies. Sometimes we watch shows, but we always have fun.
Here
on the spur. 3, 2, 1. On the spur of the podcast moment.
Yeah, we nailed it. Nailed it. Podcast. Yeah. It's Spur of the Moment Podcast every Saturday. We nailed it.
You can expect awesome content like that.
We cut flawless promos every single week.
Which brings us to the dynamics within the band.
Okay.
You know, the conversation on Arete really highlighted the strong friendship and collaborative spirit among the members.
Yeah.
Setsei, while maybe a little less vocal in the interview itself, was consistently spoken of with immense respect for his musical abilities and his reliability as a bandmate.
It sounds like they have some exciting plans in the works.
They do, yeah.
They mentioned an upcoming summer tour.
Yeah.
And it was impressive to hear that the visas for the band members from Mexico were already secured at the time of the recording.
Yeah, they're really hitting the ground running.
Yeah.
Their commitment to building a genuine fan base was also very clear.
Yeah.
They talked about their strategy of releasing multiple singles and EPs leading up to the tour.
Okay.
Right. Aiming to, really connect with listeners on a more profound level than just chasing fleeting online trends.
And they also have a management team, which is pretty impressive, with representation in both Beverly Hills and London.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah, it really speaks to the early belief in this band's potential.
I think so, yeah. I mean, Virus expressed a clear desire for genuine interaction with the audience during their concerts,
Yeah.
And stating their ambition to kind of conquer America. Conquer America, yeah. By sharing their music and their message.
Well, we will see if they are able to do that.
Yeah.
So they also touched on their diverse musical influences, which, really underscores the blend of sounds that we talked about earlier.
It does, yeah.
Ego cited progressive rock, commercial rock, and electronic music as, key influences.
Yeah.
Setsei's tastes span funk, punk, hip-hop, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay.
And Virus listed bands like Guns N' Roses, Pearl Jam, Korn, Mike Patton.
Wow.
And Avenged Sevenfold as formative for him.
Okay.
So looking ahead,
they
mentioned their upcoming EP, number 13.
Number 13.
And a planned album with the same name.
Okay.
They also have some interesting ideas for engaging their fans.
Oh, like what?
Including incorporating codes into their cover art.
Okay.
That could unlock exclusive VIP experiences and backstage access for those who can figure them out.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. Their single Thorn had just been released the day before this particular Arete conversation.
Okay.
And they gave a sneak peek at several other unreleased songs.
Oh.
Hinting at the range of their musical styles. So there's Kiss and Die, which they describe as having a Motley Crue-ish feel, and tells a story about a client and a prostitute.
Interesting.
Then there's Casting, a waltz.
Okay.
The heavier track, Storm, which is Setsei's personal favorite.
Right.
Unborn and Free, inspired by a friend's suicide.
Right.
And Semper Fidelis, a song about Marines.
That's a pretty diverse set list.
It is, yeah.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to hear about their creative process within the band,
Yeah.
which sounds both collaborative and at times challenging.
Yeah.
They used the song Macbeth as an example of a track that Virus initially wasn't keen on, but grew to appreciate through working on it with ego.
So they kind of pushed each other.
Yeah, they did, yeah. And it really emphasizes the personal and often difficult experiences that form the foundation of their songwriting.
Right.
And then they mentioned a future EP tentatively titled Super Down.
Super Down.
Super Down, yeah. And in a bit of a surprising connection, Setsei has his own clothing brand called Galactic Clothing.
Galactic Clothing.
Yeah.
All right.
And he also provides audio and lighting services.
Okay.
So,
Man of many talents.
he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, the conversation took a brief detour into ego's interest in conspiracy theories, including discussions around the moon landing and the origins of COVID-19.
All right.
It certainly adds another dimension to the individual personalities within the band.
Yeah, it always makes things interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So to recap our analysis of this conversation with, again, a few key themes really emerge. Right?
Yeah.
Their deep passion for music, fueled by a wide array of influences and personal experiences, is undeniable.
Yeah.
They have significant concerns about the current state of the music industry.
Right.
Particularly the dominance of mainstream marketing.
Yeah.
And the economic pressures that can sometimes overshadow artistic merit.
It's always a concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they are thoughtfully considering the potential impact of AI on music and creativity, balancing a degree of skepticism with a cautious optimism about its future role.
Okay.
It's a healthy approach, I think.
Yeah.
And what's also clear is the strong camaraderie between the band members, their friendship and collaborative spirit seems to be central to their music and their journey together.
Okay. And for our listeners, we've included links to Again's music and social media.
Right.
So you can explore their work further and keep up with their upcoming tour plans.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to our final thought for you today.
Right.
Considering Again's journey, their perspectives on the challenges and changes in the music world, and the deeply personal nature of their songs, what do you think is the most crucial element for genuine human creativity to thrive in a future where AI is playing an increasingly significant role in artistic expression? It's definitely something to consider. Something to think about, for sure.
Thanks for joining us on the AI Analysis Podcast.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.